Nearly every one of us uses language every day in some form or another, whether we're reading, whether we're watching news, or communicating with coworkers, family, friends. Language is a key part of everything that we do. It's like foundational to us as humans. So what happens when language fails us and we cannot communicate anymore? What do we do then? That's a question we'll explore on today's edition of America versus America. So what happens when we can't communicate anymore? Where do we go from there? In our society, we're experiencing a great amount of violence and division and frustration. And where does that come from? Why has the volume gotten so loud that no one can hear each other anymore? It started way back when. I would say in the 60s at the very, very latest, and possibly even earlier than that. It would take forever to go back and explore all the intricate details, and that's not really what we're here about. We want to, here on America versus America, we don't want to bring out more frustration and angst. We want to help find solutions and help us get to resolutions to actually fix the problems. In 2016, a very telling altercation occurred between a Yale professor, a leftist professor, and a group of students. As you might recall, there was this big furor that swept the nation regarding something called cultural appropriation. The idea that certain styles of clothing, music, dialogue, certain books, certain things belong to certain cultures and no one else had a right to touch it. We'll get into the cultural appropriation idea and some of the attitudes behind that in a future edition of America versus America. But this group of students had this altercation with this leftist professor. So go ahead and watch.
It is an affront to a group of people. Okay, great. So then that's what I want you to say. If you understand it, then you can put it in your own words. And then
okay, so you want me to say, I apologize that I hurt your feelings. I'm looking at her and I'm listening very carefully. And it goes, and deeper than that. I know it's deeper than that.
So then apologize!
I want to make sure.
I understand, like, what is the issue?
Can I say, I'm sorry, you're going to say that you have conflicting principles, right?
Yeah, you believe in the principle. Let me finish this, please.
I'm sorry to bring up like this.
Look at the
Sorry to bring up like this, but like
the one principle that you upheld.
okay, can I ask you, what is so hard for you to say those words? What is holding you back from that? Like, I don't understand. Do you need to know what you're apologizing for? Is that what your inherent discomfort with saying these words is? Is it that you're losing face? Is that you're losing ground? Is it that like your authority is lessened? So then I don't understand why we're still standing here and having this one-on-one conversation right now. So then what's the problem? Let me know the problem.
First of all, I would like to apologize for hurting your feelings, genuinely.
Okay.
And you allowed me to use that expression without it being seen as trivializing your experience.
Okay.
Okay? So I mean that. And I also, having apologized for hurting your feelings, in addition, I will acknowledge that that comes from a very deep and legitimate source of complaint. I understand it. Okay? I understand, to the extent that I can, some of the struggles that many of you have had.
Do you though? Okay, let him
I said to the extent that I can, so you can, to the extent that I can. I said, all right, so if I cannot, if I cannot, then I'll tell you.
Let us define our
if
own
I cannot,
experiences. Let us tell you if you're being racist.
Okay, no.
Actually,
Hold on,
that is actually how it works.
One second. Let me say something else. So I have a vision of us as people, as human beings.
Yes.
That actually privileges our common humanity. That is interested not in what is different among us, but what is the same. Okay? And so we all have the capacity, I believe.
Okay, so
let me finish one sentence. I believe even though I have a different life experience than you, even though I have a different skin color and gender than you, I believe there are parts of your experience that I can understand as a human
But
being.
you know how many?
Can you-
Can I really?
Hold on, one idea at a
No,
time.
listen.
One idea at a time. If you want to just look for reasons to either to think ill of me, you are free to do so.
We
But if you'd like to,
already
I understand you think ill of me.
Like,
But if you
everyone
want
just
to
be quiet.
hear what I have to say, and you want to actually, act in a way that is like people who are interested in a conversation, then let me at least address as a human being one thing at a time. Don't act like a mob that's trying to get me to say different things. Like I was just saying, I have a vision of ourselves that unites our common humanity. Okay? So I believe, even though I'm not like you in the sense of my superficial appearance, that I can sit down and talk to you and understand your predicament.
You know
that I can listen to you. If that's not true, if you deny that, then what is the reason that you ask to be heard by me or anyone else?
Because we're dying.
So did you catch that? Now, my understanding of this professor is that he had spent a great deal of time kind of previously, over the years that he taught, kind of, as you kind of saw there, not really getting to the point, not really communicating, because he kind of doesn't trust language to communicate. But he made a really, really key point, and you saw the explosion of the students there when he made that point. He said, if our communication cannot get us to understand each other, what's the point of our meeting here and talking? And they exploded. They're like, well, you can't understand. Well, you can't get where we're coming from. You just have to accept what we say and just bow to it. And they adamantly insisted on being heard, but took no time or effort to hear. They decided to be mad without taking any effort, putting any effort into trying to understand. And that division there, that angst, and you heard one of the students, when he said, so what's our point here? And she's like, we're dying. Well, that's how people feel when they don't feel heard and understood. And these students don't feel heard and understood because they've been taught that there's no way for them to be understood. I didn't continue on, but a young fella steps up to the professor and says, well, basically, you can't understand us. You just need to apologize. And the question that I've had ever since watching this like 4 years ago is, if I can't understand your pain, if there's no way you can communicate your pain to me in a way that makes sense to me, why do you want me to apologize? I don't understand what I'm apologizing for. I cannot truly apologize. And these students wouldn't accept his apology, no matter how he'd say it, because they didn't believe he could understand their pain, so they didn't believe he was sincere about apologizing. And the tensions just mounted and mounted. And the ultimate result was this professor and his wife were forced to resign from Yale because they didn't get this constituency that just couldn't handle anything that sounded like it might be anything against them. And they considered language that didn't jive with whatever they felt like hearing at the moment to be violence against them, actually to be deadly to them. It's incredible. It's incredible that intelligent people in college would come to this view. But this is what's being taught and propagated through colleges all across the country. And so it's when people feel not heard, and I'm not talking about just black folks like we're shown in here, human beings feel not heard. The next step that they run into is shouting louder. They get louder. The volume goes up. And when one side gets louder, the other side gets louder. You actually heard that here, but we're going to take a look at a couple of other situations where that was actually the case. People didn't feel heard. They didn't want to hear the other side, and so they jacked up their volume, and the other side jacked up their volume. Let's take a look here. The first one that we're going to look at, it's a very interesting one. This is in the House of Commons in Great Britain as they're debating the very, very contentious Brexit situation. I wanted to step away from just the heated race part and bring it into humanity. And this is a very, very interesting exchange here that we'll take a look at.
Point of order, Anna Soubry. Point of order, Anna Soubry.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, as somebody who has been called by the Speaker.
Order, let me just explain. Order. Let me just explain one thing in this place. The Right Honourable Gentleman is a very senior member of this House, and he is a former Chief Whip. He is not the Speaker of this House, and it's not for the Right Honourable Gentleman to presume the order in which matters are considered, and I trust that he won't suppose that it is for him to do so. Let me say very gently to the Right Honourable Gentleman, I treat him with respect. I'm not intimidated by the Right Honourable Gentleman, and I'm absolutely sure he wouldn't seek to intimidate me. I am taking a point of order from the Right Honourable Lady, and frankly, that's the situation. Point of order, Anna Soubry.
Sit down. I've been called. Mr. Speaker, the country is watching this.
Now, I didn't play all the way through that clip. Minutes into it, the Speaker of the House finally gets the House settled down, and the lady who was recognized as having the floor was able to speak. I didn't look up Anna Soubry, I guess her name is. Anna was finally allowed to speak because the Speaker took things in hand, and as you saw there, he explained, this is the order. We're going to listen. We don't have to agree. This isn't about agreement. This is about the order of listening. This is about dialing down the tone and showing respect to each other. He as much as said that. And after arm wrestling with the House for a couple more minutes, he got the House to calm down, and they proceeded with the order of the speech. Now, I'm pretty sure that it was still contentious, and the House of Commons has been for, hundreds of years, very vitriolic as that situation was. But by recognizing a procedure of listening, and by demanding that people follow that procedure for listening, they were able to move forward. Not necessarily gently, but they were able to move forward. There was another situation, however. You've seen this all over the United States. This particular incident is also in Great Britain. But you've seen colleges throughout the West where speakers are invited, and small groups of leftists refuse to let anybody who disagrees with their viewpoint to have any say at all. Now, sidebar here, that is fascism. That's how fascism works. This particular group of people, I don't think are the Antifa group, but we'll take a look at one that I believe is, that illustrates what happens when people refuse to listen to the opposite side, period, and demand to be heard and listened to on their own side. This is what goes on. So let's take a look. Speaker Don Brash visited the Auckland University. I'm not sure exactly where that is, but here's a little bit of a taste of a very long day.
After dozens of minutes, one protester finally decided to take a lead.
Stop! This means that the protesters have absolutely proven the case. Don't want to debate the issues, you just want to shout their opponents down.
As the blockade held strong, the crowd got restless. After deliberation, Brash returned to the podium. As Brash concluded, The protesters did too.
So that's a very interesting exchange there. You see that the vast majority of the audience, whether they agreed with Mr. Brash, Professor Brash, Dr. Brash, whatever is his appropriate title, whether they agreed with him or not, they came to actually hear what he had to say. And if they disagreed, they wanted to have a chance to debate. But a small group of protesters who didn't like what he had to say shouted down everything and actually got the rest of the audience stirred up against them. And if it wasn't handled right, there would have been fisticuffs of that. Interestingly, Dr. Brash's topic was that the left had gone so far, and he's not a conservative, but the left had gone so far that they were against free speech. And they proved his point. Just saying. They proved his point 100%. So on this side of the pond, let's take a look at one. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the speaker that was brought in to speak. He has his own set of opinions. I disagree with some of the things that he has to say, but he was invited to speak. And he was asked to share his opinions, and I believe that had things proceeded as they should have, there would have been good debate. People using language to communicate, as it's designed for. But let's take a look at what actually happened. Here's a snippet of a Fox News report discussing the issue here.
Violent protest over a speaker on campus here in New York City. You had numerous fights breaking out at New York University after an appearance by conservative actor and comedian Gavin McInnes was scheduled. He had been invited to speak by the college Republicans, actually got hit by pepper spray during the scuffle. Julie Banderas is watching this. She's live on the campus now, NYU Lower Manhattan. And Julie, good morning to you. What happened here?
Hey there, Bill. Yeah, once again, protesters, this time again, college protesters attempting to shoot down the free speech of a conservative speaker, this time here in liberal New York City. So not really much of a surprise, but at NYU last night, a wave of protesters, much like UC Berkeley a couple days ago, doing the same, voicing their disgust with conservative actor and Vice Media co-founder Gavin McInnes, who was inside holding a seminar for the school's college Republicans.
So did you catch that? Gavin McInnes, who is a comedian, an actor, and pretty controversial, right? Side conservative-ish person. And like I said, not all of his views are what I represent, and we might have some pretty interesting debates if we sat down. He was invited to a private meeting to speak to campus Republicans. There's no indication of what the topic was about. But the very fact that he was coming to speak on that campus drew violent protest, and he got pepper sprayed. Again, people who refuse to hear the opposition and demand to be heard by the opposition, where does it go? So the volume gets louder, nobody can hear each other, everybody's angry, everybody's frustrated. It turns out there's one language everyone can understand. Might seem obvious to you when I say it. It's violence. When you can't be heard or can't be understood, you will use force to make your point. The Germans versus the Russians in World War II. And the French versus the Russians. It didn't matter that they couldn't communicate in their minds because their point was force. They were going to do what they were going to do, and you were going to abide or die. That was the only choice left. And in this very volatile, acrid situation in America, where we have very clearly the Marxist revolution unfolding before our eyes. This is the October Revolution, or the March Revolution in Russia, all over again 100 years later. That's what's going on. The people who refuse to listen, they've made up their mind, they don't care. And flashing back to the professor and the students, at one point in a spot I didn't show, one student basically says you don't understand what it's like to be treated with racism. Nobody can treat you with racism, which is flat out about the most racist kind of comment that can be made. But when people come to the table already with their minds made up, I can do whatever I want because you're a bad guy based on some basic thing that I decided on: the color of your skin, the color of your hair, who your parents are, how much money's in your back pocket, what country you came from. Whatever is your excuse for saying you don't qualify for being treated properly as a human being because of this thing, therefore I can do whatever I want to you. But you have to treat me with honor and respect regardless of what I do because of that same thing. That racist comment demonstrated that their ears were turned off and their mouths were going. All right. And that mob got kind of going, but they finally got somebody out there to quell it in that situation. But when people act like that, they don't get the opposition to listen. Because, back to the basics here, if you don't feel heard, you get frustrated, you get louder. All right? When the other side willfully and intentionally turns off their ears and they're not willing to hear a word that you say, they're not willing to give you the time of day, they're not willing to accept that you might have something to say to them, they are not willing to accept that they might be misunderstanding or misconstruing what you have to say, you get frustrated, and the tendency of humans is to respond in kind. That's how we do. All right? And so let's take a look at something recent where these protesters have pushed so far that the opposition is responding in kind. It was loud. It was inaudible. You could hear somebody saying, kill, kill, kill. And patriots and Antifa revolutionaries were going at it, dukes up. That's the language you understand. The winner comes out, the loser goes home bruised or dead. And we've seen riots. I'm not going to show any of those here in this conversation. We've seen there's footage out there of rioters killing people, streamed live on Facebook. And why a conversation like this might get blocked off of Facebook because of the topic, but that would play on as people watch people dying in real time, in real life, thugs doing unspeakable things. All right. When people shut off the ears and run their mouths, they're unwilling to hear the opposition. They're unwilling to listen to anything. When they're unwilling to use language for what it was made for, to communicate, the only thing left is violence. That's where we are in this country right now. Now, I didn't come on here to, well, before we get there, there's a little bit of explaining how this works, how this goes from one thing to the next, that I've kind of touched on. But Ben Shapiro, whether you like him or not, Ben Shapiro explained this better than I could explain it. And so I'm simply going to throw his comments, his brief and well-considered comments onto this, into the slot here, and we'll revisit those as soon as we get back from this.
Free speech is under assault because of a three-step argument made by the advocates and justifiers of violence. The first step is they say that the validity or invalidity of an argument can be judged solely by the ethnic, sexual, racial, or cultural identity of the person making the argument. The second step is that they claim those who say otherwise are engaging in what they call verbal violence. And the final step is they conclude that physical violence is sometimes justified in order to stop such verbal violence. So let's examine each of these three steps in turn. First, the philosophy of intersectionality. This philosophy now dominates college campuses as well as a large segment, unfortunately, of today's Democratic Party, and suggests that straight white Americans are inherently the beneficiaries of white privilege and therefore cannot speak on certain policies, since they have not experienced what it's like to be black or Hispanic or gay or transgender or a woman. This philosophy ranks the value of a view not based on the logic or merit of the view, but on the level of victimization in American society experienced by the person espousing the view. Therefore, if you're an LGBT black woman, your view of American society is automatically more valuable than that of a straight white male. The next step in the logic is obvious. If a straight white male, or anybody else who ranks lower on the victimhood scale, says something contrary to the viewpoint of the higher-ranking intersectionality identity, that person has engaged in a microaggression. As NYU social psychologist Jonathan Haidt writes, microaggressions are small actions or word choices that seem on their face to have no malicious intent, but that are thought of as a kind of violence nonetheless. You don't have to actively say anything insulting to microaggress. Somebody merely needs to take offense. If, for example, you say that society ought to be colorblind, you're microaggressing certain identity groups who have been victimized by a non-colorblind society. Note, microaggressions, as the name suggests, are not merely insults. They are aggressions. They are the equivalent to physical violence. Just 2 weeks ago, psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett of Northeastern University published an essay in the New York Times suggesting that words should be seen as physical violence because they can cause stress, and stress causes physical harm. Thus, Feldman suggested it is reasonable, scientifically speaking, to ban or restrict speech you do not like at your school. This is both inane and dangerous. That's because it leads to the final logical step. Words you don't like deserve to be fought physically. When I spoke at California State University at LA, one professor threatened students who sponsored me by offering to fight them. He then posted a slogan on the door of his office stating, "The best response to microaggression is macroaggression." As Haidt writes, this is why the idea that speech is violence is so dangerous. It tells the members of a generation already beset by anxiety and depression that the world is a far more violent and threatening place than it really is. It tells them that words, ideas, speakers can literally kill them. Even worse, at a time of rapidly rising political polarization in the United States, it helps a small subset of that generation justify political violence. Indeed, protesters all too often engage in physically violent disruption when they believe their identity group is under verbal attack by someone, usually conservative, but not always. Not only do some administrators look the other way, at Middlebury College, Cal State LA, Berkeley, Evergreen, actual crimes were committed and almost nobody has been arrested. But they actively forbid events from moving forward, creating a heckler's veto. The notion that if you are physically violent enough, you can get administrators to kowtow to you, to bow before you, by canceling an event you disagree with altogether. All of this destroys free speech. But just as importantly, it turns students into snowflakes, craven and pathetic, looking for an excuse to be offended so they can earn points in the intersectionality Olympics and then use those points as a club with which to beat opponents. A healthy nation requires an emotionally and intellectually vigorous population ready to engage in open debate at all times. Shielding college students from opposing viewpoints makes them simultaneously weaker and more dangerous. We must fight that process at every step. And that begins by acknowledging that whatever we think about America and where we stand, we must agree on this fundamental principle. All of our views should be judged on their merits, not on the color or sex or sexual orientation of the speaker, and those views should never be banned on the grounds that they offend someone. Thanks so much.
So do you see how Ben puts it? He highlights how the left has removed language from the realm of communication and turned it into a weapon. If I say something you don't like, I've punched you in the nose or slashed a knife at you, stabbed you, shot you. That's their view. It's not we're communicating. It's not that we're disagreeing. They hold to the view that if I disagree with you, I hate you. Which begs the question, if I disagree with you, that means you disagree with me, right? Which means if disagreeing equals hate, then you hate me. Where does that leave us? The left has taken language away as a tool for communicating, where one human can interact with another human and take their divergent positions and negotiate a way to work together despite their different positions. It is now a weapon. Saul Alinsky, in his book Rules for Radicals, he actually taught how to weaponize language so that you can create divisions between interest groups so that you can get tensions heightened and destabilize institutions as a result. Just finished reading his book a couple of weeks ago. It's very eye-opening. I would say go get it. Even if you are not sure you can handle very different viewpoints, grab your coffee, grab your stress balls, read the book. Understand what's going on the other side. On our side, on conservative side, we still view language as a communication tool, not a weapon for gaining power. But you heard those students actually, I don't think I played that part. One student hollered out, "Why do you have to maintain power in this situation?" It showed her core belief that language is a tool for gaining power, not a means of communication. When the professor made the point of, why are we having this conversation if we can't come to any kind of commonality here? If it's impossible to come to commonality, why are we talking? To which the students exploded and then demanded further apologies. Again, back to, if I can't understand what I'm apologizing for, what good is it to apologize? Makes no sense. It is a tool, a lever to gain power on the left side. And what's happening on the conservative side is we're getting fed up with this. And we're like, if you're going to throw dukes when I say something, be ready to get my dukes back. I'm not going to stand for this. And so we have this big divide going on. We have a Marxist revolution going on, and government leaders who are so tied in with the left that they don't stop and think about the difference between speech and actual violence, and they just let stuff go on. It's creating a great deal of trouble, which you already know about. But again, we're not here to make people all upset. We're not here to stir the pot. We're here to find solutions. So let's take a look here at some of the options that we have for actually dealing with this. What can we do about it? The first thing I say, and I'm not necessarily an authority, but let's take a look here. The first thing that we must do on any side is show humility. Some of you accept the Bible, some of you don't. I don't really care. If you're not even open to considering the Bible, there's some further consequences way past that. Even if you disagree with it, we're going to get into some other things down the road here, but let's just take it for what it says. You can argue with it or not. If you want to skip ship and continue on the track to violence, now's a good time to jump out. All right. Romans chapter 12, verses 16 through 21. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Now, interestingly, that low position isn't what they are, what you perceive they are, whether it's financial or race or, class in society, whatever. Be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay evil for evil. This is a key thing. If you are on the Black Lives Matter side of things and you're like, I just want it fixed for black people. Just want it fixed. This whole world is full of racism. Everybody hates us and we're dying. Like that one girl said, we're dying. We just want it fixed. All right. This is the fix for it. This will get you into racism. All right. Listen up here. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. You can't live at peace with everyone because you're not responsible for their choices. That's back to the speech thing. You're not responsible for what somebody else says, and I'm not responsible for your response to what I say. Okay? You're a human being, presumably an adult, capable of making your own choices, making it in a world that, sometimes doesn't really care about you. Honestly. I've been knocked in the teeth a few times by life. You just get up and you move on. There are bandages. I'm sorry. It's the way life is. I try to live peaceably with everyone that I can, and some people will not live peaceably with me. What can I do? I don't need to go cause trouble with them. Just make a wide berth there, That's the option. But a lot more people can get along with others than you think. And there's a very good reason to get along with others, if for no other reason than the selfish one, and that is, I like my teeth, I want to keep them. I make somebody else mad enough to knock them out, I don't get to keep my teeth. It's just the way it goes. Now, I don't make somebody mad, but I can get in their face, I can cause trouble, I can egg them on, I can push them to their breaking point, and yes, they're responsible for their choices. But if I keep pushing and pushing and pushing, getting in their face, when they slug me, my teeth are gone. And it doesn't matter how much I sue them or how much they go to jail or whatever, my teeth are still gone. And some of you need to think about, you're going to push somebody to the point they will kill you. And I ain't joking. They will kill you. And it doesn't matter how right you were, dead is still dead. Okay? Those are the tensions we have going on in this country. We don't need to back down to people who do evil, but this is the key for overcoming it. All right, let's take a look here. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, revenge is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If your enemy is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. All right? You see this fix here? You are going to run into racists. There are people that do hate you for really stupid reasons. There aren't many. But this Black Lives Matter stuff is making more of them every minute. The reason is the Black Lives Matter crew is confirming people in their suppositions, in their stereotypes. A lot of people, cultures don't mix a lot in a lot of places. Just a fact. All right? So a lot of times people don't have a lot of experience with cultures outside of their little community. Even if that other culture lives 3 miles down the road at another side of town. All right? People run in the circles they run in. It's just human nature. It's the way it goes. All right? So you have people who don't have a lot of experience dealing with black people. They bump into one at a store or serving them. They bump into one, at an athletic event who's there to enjoy the show. Maybe they seem like decent people, but you don't know one way or another because you don't really run into them. But you heard people say, and you see the TV shows. And so you have this sort of idea of how black people generally are, not based on experience, okay? And then the news is swamped with images of black people rioting, and every time a black person shows up on a TV show, they say, oh, they're so, or white. I mean, I've seen this happen with a lot of white people. They're just so mad they can't control themselves. It's like, you're giving people that are ignorant or already biased excuses. You're creating more racism by not using your completely human ability to communicate as a decent human being. And there are plenty that do. Candace Owens and Dr. Ben Carson, one of the most genius people who ever walked the planet. It's Dr. Ben Carson. Names that just escape me, but right now, we have people speaking out about these very topics that are from the black community who are not just the smartest people in the black community. They are some of the smartest people who ever lived, and they're talking about this stuff. And they're communicating, and they're making their points. But you have rioters who react first and they're burning down their own communities, and they're shooting their own people, and they're confirming the biases of people who aren't racist yet. They just didn't know what to think. You don't want to do that. And then to have churches and so forth back that. There are groups out there, and I haven't researched them yet. I'm going to actually hit this topic, and I'm going to do the research and find out groups that are working for the good of the black community, who are actually doing good and not burning everything down. They're communicating, they're being helpful, they're addressing the real needs and the real problems in a truthful way. We're going to get to that. If you do good to people who think ill of you, actively, not just kind of stay out of their way, but actively do good to people that hate you, you force them to confront their hatred. Yes, there are racist people out there. There are people out there who are going to take one look at you, and I'm talking about black side too. The idea that just because I'm not born with the suntan, that you can't be racist against me, is the most racist statement you can make. Judging a person based on their skin color, their parentage, their nationality, flat out racist. It doesn't matter what shade their suntan is, all right? So you have to recognize yourself. If you're being racist, regardless of the color of your suntan, are you being racist? And what can you do to do good to people that you think are your enemies? If you do that, you're going to be amazed. It's not instant. You're going to be amazed at how that racism problem dissipates like fog. It's just crazy how that works. I've had these situations myself. Not necessarily, sometimes it has been. I've been treated with racism, but mostly other things. But where I've had people against me, and I treated them like this, and over time, enemies became friends, okay? It works. And there's a God in heaven that makes it work, and I just flat out, that's the truth, okay? You don't have to buy it, but drive the wrong way on a street, you're going to have a crash. You drive the right way and it's going to work. It's just life. The next thing is to listen. Now, honestly, for the 6 people that started watching this video, if you're not open to listening, you're probably not already here. Or not still here. But the matter is so important, it still needs to be said. All right. Listen to others. James 1:19 through 21. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Now, a lot of you might be looking at that and going, who cares about the righteousness God desires? I don't really give 2 figs about God. It really doesn't matter to me. What God wants ain't on my radar, all right? I'll tell you what's on God's radar. God gets more angry than anything else at people mistreating other people, his creation. The Bible says God created man in his image, mankind, men and women, in God's image. Adam and Eve weren't white. Shooting straight up, okay? You go by genetics, it's a pretty good chance that they were some kind of middle brown and everything split out from there. And Adam's name also means red. So, you know, look at a traditional Native American if you want to see what, or a Middle Eastern person if you want to see what Adam and Eve most likely looked like, all right? The thing that angers God the most is mistreating other people. And you look at the 10 Commandments, you know, you shall not steal, you shall not kill, you shall not perjure yourself, bear false witness, you shall not covet what belongs to your neighbor. Those are all things about how you should treat your neighbor, how you should treat your next door person. You know, we have an obligation to treat our fellow humans properly. That's the righteousness of God right there, okay? Not mistreating other people, treating people with respect, treating people with dignity, no matter what's the color of their suntan, what's the color of their eyes, what kind of weave they got in their hair, or lack thereof. You know, what are they driving, where do they live, who do they work with, who do they know, who did they vote for? You know, you want to bust the chops of somebody wearing a MAGA hat, you're in violation. I promise you. The human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. All right, here's the thing. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. If you flip that on its head, that's evil. And I'm not joking. If you're quick to get mad, if you're quick to take offense, if you plug your ears fast and you want to run your yapper, that is evil. Flat out, no holds barred. And I don't care what color your suntan is, all right? If I do it, I'm evil. If you do it, I didn't say it. It's right here. Right here, folks. You can look it up. You can look it up online even if you don't have a Bible. James chapter 1 verses 19 through 21. All right? Straight up, if you refuse to listen to others and you quickly get angry, that is evil. All right? No mincing words here. The third thing we need to do is judge. Now you're like, doesn't your Bible say, do not judge lest you be judged? Yeah. If you snip it out words, all right? We are to judge the actions and the fruit in our own lives and in the lives of those around us. We're to call it out ourselves in our own lives. Us first. Jesus said something very interesting. He said, those of you who are busy trying to fix your brother, take a look in the mirror. You got a lodgepole in your eye. You're busy trying to fix your brother. Why don't you get that lodgepole out, and then you can see clearly to get the sliver out of your neighbor's eye, out of your brother's eye. Okay? Yeah, big old telephone pole sticking out of your eye, and you want to dig around in somebody else's. Me first. Judge me, judge my life. I look at my life, I look in the mirror, and I see if I'm wrong. All right? That's what you need to do here. Proverbs 6, verses 16 to 19. There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, lying listed twice there. That's very interesting. And a person who stirs up conflict in the community. Folks, the Bible says that there are 6 things God hates, 7 that make him puke. That's what that word means, detestable to him. Make him throw up, all right? Every one of those 7 things are things that are being done by Antifa, Black Lives Matter, the Marxist revolutionaries that are taking over this country. Now we, on the conservative side, can do the same evils too. They're all evil. They're not relegated to idiots. Any person can fall into that. Well, I'm better than the Antifa people. Huh. Well, you know what? Let's worry about each of us ourselves, okay? Now, some of you are like, I don't need this. I'm not listening. You're just full of hot air. Maybe other things that I wouldn't say in a family-friendly show. You need to know. There's just to put it out, there's a prophet that was telling a king how to rectify some things, and the king refused to listen, and the prophet shut up. And the Bible says, because he realized that God had determined to destroy him. If you want to be destroyed, turn off your ears, okay? Turn off your ears. Don't listen. Dial away. Your own choices and your own actions are going to get you ruined. You're going to fall into your own pit. You're going to die in your own traps, okay? This is a warning to help you make better choices, get better. And it doesn't just help America, but it helps everyone who lives here, which is probably you as well as me, okay? More racism doesn't end racism. More hate doesn't end hate. And more injustice doesn't resolve injustice. Think about this. Something is unjust because somebody who's not guilty of something suffered the consequences of that, right? So if in your community you've suffered injustice, Yes, that needs to be resolved. But doing injustice is doing harm to somebody who's not guilty. Okay? People who didn't wrong you don't deserve to be wronged because you're frustrated that you were wronged. Back to this verse here, it says, leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay. God's going to take care of it. Now, there's stuff that we have to do, and when it comes to governments, they are responsible to protect and defend the citizens. And if in effort to avenge yourself of wrongs, real and imagined, you put at jeopardy the law and order of a country, the government is obligated to put a stop to you. There's nothing about this that says a government can't or shouldn't do their job of protecting and defending the law-abiding citizens. Okay? And if you insist on pushing your way, I don't care if you're Black Lives Matter, Nazi, if you're patriot, whatever, if you are not willing to let God take care of his job and to back up law and order doing their job to protect citizens, you're going to get caught in the crossfire, or you're going to get caught in somebody's sights. It's not going to go down well for you. That old song, I fight authority, authority always wins. It's just not going to go down well for you. We need to recognize fellow humans, the humanity of those around us, even though we disagree with their viewpoints. Okay? One of my good friends, I guess good acquaintances, I don't know if we could be considered friends, but I'd help him out, and in the past he's helped me out, and we've had a good time. Polar opposites on opinions. And he was very afraid of conservatives, and he totally 100% buys into this Black Lives Matter stuff. But we got a chance to connect over and over again. And I was able to use these same guidelines not to win him over to my viewpoint. He still is 100% opposite of me on viewpoints. But to help him understand that even though we disagree, his identity isn't tied up in what he thinks, his opinions, it's tied up in his humanity. And that we can interact as humans even though we disagree. It's just the way it goes. Realize the power of genuine communication. We're not hollering at each other. We're not demanding to be heard, but not showing enough respect to others to listen. You might find that your opponent doesn't disagree with you as much as you think. I found that out with my friend. And he found out he didn't disagree with me as much as he thought. Respect others, even opponents. I remember the story of French and British fighters in World War I going up against the Germans. And you remember the Red Baron and the tri-wing red plane that stood out like a sore thumb. The Red Baron was an excellent fighter pilot. He shot down dozens of Allied planes. And he always overflew the funeral of a pilot he'd shot down and dropped a wreath. He may have been their opponent, but he recognized their humanity, and he showed respect even to opponents that he had fought with and had overcome. And when he was shot down and killed, the Royal Air Force flew over and dropped a wreath in his honor. Honor begets honor. Hate begets hate. You need to decide which side of the table you're going to be on. The Bible says, whoever returns evil for good, evil will never depart from his house. If you redefine the good people are doing to you as evil, when somebody smiles at you, you call it a microaggression, you want to punch their teeth in. When somebody looks you in the eye, you decide they're challenging you. If you decide that evil is going to be your modus operandi, you are going to bring disaster on your own house and your own family. We're going to get into the deal about race war in another edition of this. There's a lot to discuss and a lot to consider. What is going on right now? aside from this is how we individually, each of us, can reach out and deal with it, there are some key organized things going on in the background. It's a very, very real, genuine Marxist revolution that's going on. You need to know what is going on and why. We have a book called Color, Communism, and Common Sense. It was written by one of the guys who actually helped organize the stuff that's going on almost a century ago. He realized how blacks were being used as a tool by communists, the Marxists. They didn't care about blacks. They just wanted to use the frustrations that blacks faced as a tool to gain the Marxist revolution. This guy was actually involved in planning, and he wrote a book once he left the communist side explaining what it was about and why it's dangerous for blacks. Share it out to everybody. It's in an ebook format, which means you can put it in your Google Play reader or your iPhone books or whatever your favorite ebook reader is, and you can highlight, take notes, the whole 9 yards. We wanted to make it easy for you because it's going to be worth highlighting and taking notes. Check this out. This shows a little bit of information about it. All right, so go to our website. It's on the main page. All right, so blackbirdbrigade.com. There's a link on the home page. Click that. You can download the book. And then visit our site. Sign up for our list. We're going to let you know about stuff as it comes down. We're not about hype and division and causing trouble. We're about finding solutions. America's in a fix right now, and yes, we have a Marxist revolution going on we have to take seriously. But there are things that we can do. So get on our list, get to know about it, like, subscribe, and share. And if you're on Parler, echo the dickens out of this video. Echo the dickens out of it. That's all I can say. So thank you for joining us on this edition of America versus America. Until next time, over and out.